Recording on the cloud.
I'm on the cloud. Hi, Irene. Rainy Wales. Wow, we're glad you're here. It's a beautiful way to spend a rainy evening now for you.
Interesting. Okay, it's not letting me record since you're recording, so we will just trust that Mercury is now direct and we will be okay. Because I have had my share of Mercury retrograde issues, even though some part of me lightly doesn't believe in it, and often I have tested it. But I was not specifically testing, but started out with a computer crash on the day of the station. And then finally last week, my computer completely went out and I had to spend quite a lot of time with a new computer and all that it takes to get yourself when you live with your computer. And part of my living with my computer is that I am very involved with all of the OPA events as the president of this beautiful organization. We have right now two websites. We have the regular OPA website and we have the OPA Astrology events.org, where you can always go and see what is coming up. And at this point in time, we have a handful of spots open in our peer groups. Peer groups is OPA's signature certification training that works with ethics and problems that astrologers face with really bringing your astrology to an excellent place and business planning and branding. And it's really a wonderful experience if you've never tried it. And we do that online and also virtually by Zoom. I know that there's one spot left in Arlen's group in Maine and a couple of other spots that are virtual. And we'll be scheduling more peer groups for the spring and next fall. So you can stay tuned for that if this fall doesn't work for you. Then we have consulting skills, and we'll be scheduling two groups for 2024 soon. However, Alexandra Karakostis is offering a peer group, or I'm sorry, a consulting skills training in Greece coming up in November. So if you're in Europe or you would just like to travel or you already live in Greece, you can see that on the website. And consulting skills is also a very significant part of what we offer here at OPA to help you take your consultations from just data delivery and monologues into something that's alive and helpful and transformational for people. We have a new astronomy program led by Lene Van Horn and Jeff Grunland, and that's going through its first 9-week process right now, but we will be offering it again next year. And our annual mentorship program is finishing up for many people now, but a whole new mentorship program begins in 2024. And that allows you to work with one astrologer in a small group for 6 months, every single thing about being an astrologer. So OPA is the organization for professional astrology. We want to teach people and guide people and lead people. But if you are a professional astrologer, we have these trainings for you as well. Back
Thank
to you
so much, Kay.
And then you'll hear more from me later about consulting skills and relationship astrology.
Correct. And, we are so excited to have Alan Annand, Ann Sundell, and Kay Taylor here to share with us relationship astrology, which we've titled A Tapestry of Life Connections. So it's a beautiful time to be together today to talk about this. So excited to see our room 61 people strong right now. And so I think here we are ready to begin. So I'd like to introduce Alan Annand. Am I pronouncing that correctly, or is it Anand?
Annand.
Annand. Okay, beautiful. If I mispronounce a name, please correct me. Alan is an astrologer. He's a palmist. He's an author. He's a graduate of the British Faculty of Astrological Studies, and he was for many years their sole tutor for students in the US and Canada. After being introduced to Jyotish, he was later certified by the American College of Vedic Astrology and went on to enjoy advanced instruction from his guru. Aside from consulting and tutoring, he has been a professional writer. His New Age noir crime novels feature an astrologer protagonist whom one reviewer has dubbed Sherlock Holmes with a horoscope. He's written 6 books on Vedic astrology and 3 for a Western sidereal audience, all of which have been praised for the quality of their research and writing. And yes, I think you're a fabulous researcher and a great writer as well. His latest book, The Passionate Planets, Love, Marriage, and Sexuality in the his latest book is The Passionate Planets, Love, Marriage, and Sexuality in the Horoscopes, is a complete guide to personal relationships as seen through the lens of astrology. So, Alan, I'm thrilled to have you here. All of OPA is thrilled to welcome you and to ask you to take it away. Thank you so much.
Lovely. Thank you, Merriman. I will go right to my screen here. And I'm going to skip over the, oops, let me make sure that I'm, okay, in the right place. Okay, you've already made a plug for me here in terms of history. There's a shot of the cover of that latest book. Much of this, this discussion today draws from this particular book. So, you know, I've been a professional astrologer for 40 plus years now. The first 15 years of it, I guess, was as a Western astrologer. And then in the mid-90s, I discovered Vedic astrology and moved over and truly never went back. So even though I still practice Western astrology of a sort, certainly when I write these particular books for siderealists, I use the sidereal zodiac. Now, I know not everyone's into that. Have an open mind about it. The charts you will see here are all in sidereal form. So if you see a person that you recognize, but the chart doesn't look the same, well, there's the reason. So before I get into this discussion, a quick couple of concepts from Vedic psychology. There's this notion in Vedic philosophy that everything that we experience leaves some residue or trace of that experience in our, what they call the karma shaya, which is basically a kind of a personal unconscious that sort of travels with us through multiple incarnations. So that trace or residue is called a samskara. And these things that sort of accumulate and reside within our psyche, even as we are reborn into multiple incarnations over time. Samskaras that have an affinity for each other then form sort of a bundle and what you could call a psychological complex, which then creates drives, motivations, biases for the individual. And those are called vasanas. So samskaras are residues from experience. I mean, even a thought, a spoken word, or an action is an experience. And they bundle into these vasanas, which constitute complexes. And this all plays out in karma in a way. With each reincarnation, we are born with a certain bundle of these samskaras and vasanas ladled out from the giant soup pot of our accumulated karmas. And you get a certain serving of that in one individual lifetime, and then you work with that. So that's kind of like the background philosophy. So my talk today is all about relationships, and relationships are confounding for many people. I mean, how many people do you know who wish to be married and yet are not married? How many people do you know who never really planned to get married and yet they've ended up married? So it's a bit of a mystery, but this mystery can be resolved to some degree by study of the horoscope. So there's 2 key principles when we look at a horoscope. People are driven by what we call their vasanas, their psychological complex, and those are assessed by the planets. So, Western astrology, we look at patterns, whether they be T-squares, grand trines, or, conjunctions, and so on and so forth. Those all sort of constitute a form of psychological complex that drives a person to do this, that, or the other thing. But even though you might drive to, let's say, become a millionaire, I mean, how many people have been to these millionaire mind seminars, and yet how many people have actually become millionaires? Well, it's not a lack of desire. It's, a consequence of karma. Not everybody is made to be a millionaire, even though they might want it desperately. So when it comes to assessing, what is the outcome for relationship or career or pursuit of wealth, we don't assess that via the planets so much as we assess it via the analysis of the particular house that governs that domain. So if it's relationships, we're going to analyze the 7th house. If it's a career, we're going to analyze the 10th house. And that involves, a number of different planets. So planets give us impulses, and the strengths or weaknesses of planets in the horoscope make up our psychological complexes and drive us to do certain things, or frankly, to avoid certain things as well, too. And yet the consequences of our actions are measured in a different way through house analysis. So I'll try to illustrate most of this as I plow through this. And I've got, there's quite a few principles to illustrate here, so I'm going to move along fairly briskly. So basically, when we come to the pursuit of relationship, there are 2 planets that are very pro-relationship, and there are 2 planets that are anti-relationship. So those that are inclined for relationship are the moon and Venus. And we might sort of, have intuited that because, the moon is, emotionally responsive, domestic and nurturing, just kind of like mom. Venus, meanwhile, is affectionate, pleasure-seeking, romantic, and enjoys companionship. So those 2 are natural. And when their influence is dominant in the horoscope, you'll get basically a romantic of some sort. The reluctant 2 planets are Mercury and Saturn. Now, why? Think of them as archetypes. Mercury is an archetype of an adolescent. An adolescent is too young, too fickle, too distracted to be an equal player in serious relationship. On the other end of the spectrum, we have Saturn. And as an archetype, Saturn is too old, too cold, too distant to engage in serious relationship. Now, this doesn't preclude the possibility that you could have Gemini rising or Capricorn rising and still be functional in a relationship. We're looking primarily at an ascendant, the ascendant Lord, and the influence by Moon and Venus on those factors versus the influence of Mercury and Saturn on those factors to, develop an inclination versus a reluctance for relationship. So I'll start illustrating this. You might wonder, what about the other planets? Well, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and the nodes are all somewhat neutral on marriage. The Sun and the nodes, for instance, are extremely constant in their movements. And for that reason, they kind of uphold the status quo. And the status quo for, society is basically bonding, pairing, and marriage. We know it's not universal and not everyone does, but still society, likes that because it provides stability for a race and indeed civilization. Mars is passionate, but can be disturbing as well, too. So it's a bit of a, 50-50 proposition, but basically it supports marriage. And Jupiter, of course, is the epitome of proper conduct. And, so it always favors creating, cohesive pairing bonding units that can, foster families, and that creates stability for society and so on. Okay, so when it comes to asking, I've had so many clients sit across the desk from me and ask me questions like this: when will I get married and how many children will I have? And what you can detect right there are 2 gross assumptions. 1, will I even become married at all? 2, will I even have children? Never mind, when and how many. So to decipher that, we should be looking at the horoscope first to see whether, the person has any such inclination to marriage. So we're focusing on the self first, the ascendant or its lord. And basically, if the ascendant, obviously the ascendant is opposite the 7th house, but if the ascendant lord has any link to the 7th house, if it's in the 7th house or it's linked to lord of the seventh by association or aspect, that's an inclination. But if either of those is linked to the moon or Venus, which, from an earlier slide, we said those are definitely the romantic planets that are inclined towards marriage, then this is one of those signatures for relationship. We can also look at the seventh house. Why? Well, because it represents one's partner or one's potential partner. And so if there are connections between, if the seventh lord occupies the seventh house, that's some degree of strength. If the seventh lord is exalted, that obviously means something good about the potential partner as well. And if the seventh house is occupied or aspected by moon or Venus, or the seventh house is linked in some way to moon or Venus, these are all indicative of inclination to marry. So here's an example. Martin Scorsese, who, I gotta move this thing here so it's not in my way. So Martin Scorsese, we start off by looking at the ascendant. And notice that the moon is directly opposite. So there's a direct link there with the moon for some degree of romanticism. Look next at the ascendant lord. The ascendant lord is the sun. It's in the fourth house. It's associated with Venus, one of the romantic planets. You might say, oh, well, it's directly opposite Saturn. Isn't that an impediment? Well, in this case, no, it's actually a link because Saturn is the lord of the seventh house. So you have the first and the seventh lords in direct opposition to each other. And here we're looking at sign by sign contacts or relationships as we would do in Hellenistic astrology, for instance. The orb is not really necessary. So long as you have a sign-to-sign relationship, it's functional. What else is going on in this when we examine the seventh house? Oh, the moon is there. The seventh lord is Saturn. Saturn is in a sign of Venus. Saturn is in direct opposition aspect with Venus as well, too. So, and this is a particularly strong bond because Venus and Saturn are in what we call mutual aspect or regard or sight of each other. That's one bond, but the other bond is that Venus disposits that Saturn as well, too. So that creates a kind of a double bond as well, too. So, and again, I'm going to move forward quickly. This is just to give you the flavor of the inclination. Now, talk about reluctance. The principles are similar. We look at the ascendant or its lord and look for links to Mercury or Saturn, because links with either one of those will, imply, adolescent fickle feelings or being distant and cold and disinclined. If the first house, if the first lord, is debilitated, that'll indicate maybe the person is not up to it. If the individual is not strong, they're not really, fit for the rigors of a long-term relationship. So if the first lord is debilitated, or even on the cusp of a sign, within 1 degree of a cuspal change, that can indicate some instability as well, too. If the first lord is in one of the so-called evil houses, 6, 8, or 12, that implies, again, some dysfunctionality, inability to sort of cope with the rigors of marriage. And if the first lord is in a sign of Mercury or Saturn, that too can be a problem. And then we can flip around from the self to the other and say vis-a-vis the other, that's indicated by the seventh house, or its lord, or Venus, which is a kind of a generic indicator for relationship for all of us. And again, we're looking for links to Mercury or Saturn to be indicative of a reluctance. If the seventh lord or Venus is debilitated, again, it implies some sort of weakness on the part of the partner or with respect to the partnership itself. Or again, if one of those is right on a cusp of a sign change, that too can reflect some disability. And if either of those, seventh lord or Venus, is in one of those evil houses, 6, 8, or 12, that's problematic. Or even if it's in the second house, which if you do a count, that's 8 houses away from the seventh. And that represents a potential trauma or deregulation or failure of the relationship. And last but not least, if any of those three, the seventh house or its lord or Venus is in a sign of Mercury or Saturn, that too is problematic because we're simply not ready. So here's an example of Nikola Tesla, contemporary of Thomas Edison, inventor of the AC electrical current system. This guy was handsome, he was brilliant, he held hundreds of patents, he was wealthy, he was the talk of the town. Every New York society matron wanted their daughter to marry this guy, but he was having none of it. He loved pigeons and had nothing to do with women. He said a relationship would just distract me from my work. So check out what's going on in his horoscope. Despite being an Aries rising, you'd think he'd be, hot for it, right? But it was not. So follow the Lord of the ascendant, and that's Mars. And there it is in the sixth house. Lo and behold, it's in a sign of Virgo. So remember, that's puts a damper on that whole prospect. What else? Look at the seventh house for the prospect for the other. Well, that is Venus. And now Venus here can play double duty. One, it is the seventh lord, but number two, it is also the generic indicator for relationships. So where is Venus? It's in Gemini, a sign of Mercury. Even worse, it's with Mercury. It's with Saturn as well, too. So everything here vis-a-vis relationship is very tepid. You could say, well, Mars, the ascendant lord, is with the moon, and yes, that would be a factor for passion, but the moon itself is in a sign of Virgo. In fact, you've got, for 7 out of 9 planetary bodies. Oh, I should point out, of course, that I'm sort of functioning at the level of a traditional siderealist point of view, where I'm not including Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And again, that is a sort of standard practice in Vedic astrology, but in Hellenistic astrology as well, too, and in many traditional astrologers as well. If you go back to sort of the period of Lilly and those who are really, devoted advocates of that system, they may not use the outer planets as well, too. So if anyone's wondering, where are the outer planets? They're going to be absent from all these charts. So then there's another notion called love marriage, which is, sort of a passionate drive for relationship. And in India, people who are adherents to a love marriage are those who won't wait for their parents to, hook them up with someone of their choosing. They fall in love of their own. In Western society, this sort of indicates kind of people that would elope, in defiance of their parents' desires. And the key factors here is when you have Moon or Mars involved. Moon, obviously, because it reflects emotional spontaneity, and Mars because, it's a kind of a transgressive planet that, exhibits courage and daring and defiance, if you like. So, from the point of view of the self, again, it's a typical protocol. Look at the self, look at the other, and see whether they're, triggered by these key influencing planets, Moon or Mars in this case. So with the self, the ascendant or its lord, vis-a-vis the other person, it's the seventh house, its lord, and again, Venus as a generic indicator for the relationship. And again, Moon or Mars is what we're looking for as a kind of a trigger. So here's Larry King, talk show host, gave something like 10,000 interviews on CNN over the years. Larry King also married something like, gosh, I've forgotten, I think married 6 times to 5 different women. So check out the ascendant. So here you have Moon and Venus. So, go back to the first principles of inclined for marriage. Moon and Venus are the romantics. There they are in the ascendant. But now we're upping the ante and seeing Mars in there too, which, Moon and Mars evoke passion. So these are very strong factors, and incredibly, passionate individual. He kept marrying women younger and younger as he got older as well. He didn't stay within his peer group. So this whole cluster, Moon, Mars, and Venus, they all look directly opposite into the chart and influence the seventh house. The seventh lord is Mercury. Notice that it is in a sign of Mars. Mercury in its retrograde period is brighter than normal, and that's why in Vedic astrology, retrograde planets are not considered debits, but actually credits, because they're brighter and more visible in the sky than usual. Okay, that's all I want to say about Larry King. There's this notion of mixed marriage, which is a phrase that we can, again, comes out of Hindu society. Mixed marriage is when people marry out of their caste, out of their religion, out of their nationality, and anything like that that, you know, causes their parents to, you know, shake their head in dismay. In Western society, we can apply this as well, though, for anyone who sort of, you know, jumps the fence of the norms of relationship. So when you get significant age disparities in relationship, when you have significant disparities in, you know, socioeconomic status, same-sex couples, for instance, this is a perfect example of that. So basically, you know, for such a person to do such a thing, they do have to have this Moon-Mars thing driving them already, emotional spontaneity and courage to act. But after that, they need to have links with Saturn or Rahu. Rahu, the other name for the North Node. Both Saturn and Rahu are associated with foreigners. Saturn, you can sort of get the idea because it's the most distant of all the visual planets. It's out there on the borderline of the visible solar system. So it's almost on the edge of, you know, the unknown. And Rahu has an affinity with Saturn as well, too. So again, we're looking for links of the first house or its lord with Saturn or Rahu. And again, the seventh house and its lord or Venus with Rahu. So here's an example, Priyanka Chopra. Gosh, I forget which Jonas she married. I think it was Nick. So, you know, this is sort of goes a bit against the grain, but, you know, there you have it. So what is it that triggers that in her? Well, first, she's got the moon in the first house. So, you know, this emotional responsiveness is there for her and a bit of a romantic. The moon is exalted in Taurus, so that kind of ups the ante on that whole thing as well, too. The first lord, Venus, is associated with Rahu, and that sort of provides some notion there of the foreignness, the potential foreignness of the other party. And if you go to the seventh house, you see Scorpio. And again, we're using traditional rulerships, I'm reminding you, because there's no Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto here to co-rule any of those signs, Scorpio, Sagittarius, or Pisces. It's just Mars, Jupiter, and, sorry, what did I miss? Mars ruling Scorpio, Pisces being ruled by Jupiter, and Aquarius being ruled by Saturn. So if we go to the seventh house, we see Mars. Where is Mars? It's here in the fifth house, and it's with Saturn. That's the key takeaway. Mars, the seventh lord, is associated with Saturn, who is a indicator of the foreigner. Marital harmony. Now we get into a different thing. Now, up until now, we've been looking at planets and their interrelationships with each other, and not considering lordships really that much. But now when we talk about marital harmony or strife, we're going to be examining the seventh house and its lord, and Venus, which is a generic significator for relationships. And we want to see, you know, any or all of those three strong or under, you know, the influence of benefics, not weakened in any way, and not suffering at the hands of malefics. And for them to be most regular and upholding the status quo, you know, it's good if they're in the signs of Sun, Moon, Mars, or Jupiter, assuming that they're dignified in such circumstances. So Paul Newman is a great example, because here you have Jupiter in its own sign in the first house. So for one, you know, first thing off, this indicates, you know, a very dharmic, ethical, moralistic individual. So even in Hollywood, which is, you know, infamous for, you know, partner swapping and bed hopping, you know, Paul Newman was married once, but then once he married, after that marriage was over, and then he married Joanne Woodward, he was with her for the rest of his life, which is some 40, 50, I've forgotten now, but, you know, a lifelong relationship. So Jupiter's in the first house, strong morals, ethics. It's also with Mercury, which is the seventh lord. So there's a bond right there. First and seventh house lords bonded, and both strong. Jupiter, because it's in its own sign, both Jupiter and Mercury get what we call directional strength when they're in the ascendant, and they're both associated with Venus, which is the the generic significator for relationships in general. And all three of them look across into the seventh house, and sort of they're all benefics, Jupiter, Mercury, and Venus, occupying the first house, and they all aspect the seventh house. And the seventh lord, Mercury, is influenced by association by the prime benefic Jupiter and by the secondary benefic Venus. So this is all very, solid. The seventh lord, Mercury, has gone to a good house, enjoys strength and the comfort of benefics. It doesn't get much better than this. Marital strife is when, a lot of the opposite happens. The seventh house, its lord and Venus are all under duress of some sort. They go to one of the evil houses, 6, 8, or 12. They end up being under the influence of malefics. One of the other is debilitated or combust or something like that. Ironically, sometimes you can even get bullet number 4 here. When an exalted planet is in the seventh house, this can actually even create problems for you. Why? Because it implies that you have such an attractive partner, the planet in the seventh house is exalted, that it's like, bees are attracted to honey. Your partner attracts other romantic interests, and it's a constant torture for you because your partner is tormented. I mean, that's the way we think of this. Let's look at an example. Princess Margaret of the royal family, kind of a sad story. She fell in love with a guy, Townsend, who was an Air Force officer, but because he'd been divorced, the family denied her the ability to marry. She ended up with Lord Snowdon. He was basically a playboy, and gave her no rest in terms of heartache and his affairs. And then she had a pretty restless life after that. So look what's going on in her horoscope. In her seventh house, she has Venus, which is debilitated. So there's a debilitated planet, Venus being the generic indicator for relationships. Mercury is in its own sign, Virgo, and we actually in Vedic astrology, they consider this the exalted position of Mercury as well too. So this creates, the sort of attraction of the other partner, and certainly that was true of Lord Snowdon. He was an extremely attractive man, and an inveterate flirt and playboy. So this gave her, no lack of grief. So what else is going on here? Both Mars and Saturn afflict these pairs. So you've got a very mixed review of what's going on. Some misery with Venus and Virgo in the seventh house. The curse of a very attractive partner with Mercury so strong in the seventh house. And both are squared by the two malefics, Mars and Saturn. So this is quite problematic. Another notion that is not much used in modern Western astrology, but it certainly is used in Vedic astrology and in traditional astrology, is this notion of hemming. If you look at the seventh house, you see a malefic on one side, the sun. You see a malefic K2. The nodes are regarded as malefics in Vedic astrology. And in my practice with, I've as a functional astrologer, consulting astrologer for 40 plus years, I've worked both sides of the street for 20 years plus, and my experience of applying so many of these principles of Vedic astrology to Western sidereal astrology, it works beautifully. This is all I can say. People ought to give it a chance. So this notion of hemming puts great stress upon the seventh house relationships. Multiple marriage. This is my last bit, and I know this has been a speedy delivery. Mutable ascendants, dual ascendants will put dual signs on the seventh house as well. And duality creates ambivalence, doubt, juggling, uncertainty, and problems of one kind or another. The mutable sign lords, Mercury and Jupiter, are also somewhat fickle as well too. Mercury is undecided, Jupiter is opportunistic and, sort of indicates a multiplicity of things. And this can really aggravate, relationships if they're, sort of creating stress and strain on the seventh house. And water signs are very emotionally responsive as well too. So when water is a big factor in the seventh house or its lord or the influence upon it, that can be problematic as well too. Here's Elizabeth Taylor, a great example. So go straight to the 7th house and see there we have Taurus. Look where Venus has gone. Venus is in the 5th house. You know, that's sort of a love of love. But Venus is in Pisces. That's a dual sign, and it's a water sign as well. That's almost double jeopardy in terms of, a wandering eye and an attraction to others. Notice the influence here of Jupiter. Jupiter trines that Venus, not only sign by sign, but actually quite close by degree. This Venus is exalted. That ups the ante hugely on Venus's role as 7th Lord and as a generic significator for Venus. And then Jupiter's influence, Jupiter is also exalted, and it aspects and disposits, so there's a very powerful bond there. And Jupiter's role in bringing multiplicity to relationships really takes it over the top. And so this is basically the sum of her scenario, is this focal Venus as Lord and generic indicator for relationships in a watery dual sign, aspected and disposited by its by Jupiter, which is also very powerful, being exalted, and incidentally being bright as well too, gives it more credence as well. Okay, so that's the end of, I'm sorry I had to go through that so quickly, but I'm done. Thank you. Let me stop sharing.
Alan, thank you so much. That was simply, it was an impeccable presentation. Thank you. And rapidly delivered a lot of beautiful information. Thank you so much. That is really great. And so to keep us moving along, I will invite Anne to come on screen, and and Sundell is here from Finland. And let's see. Beautiful.
Hi.
Hi, I am going to spotlight you. There we go. I'm going to turn off my camera. And well, I'm going to introduce you first, and then I will turn off my camera. Thank you so much, Alan. I might ask you to turn off your camera and we'll keep Anne spotlighted. Thank you so much. So Anne Sundell is with us, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. It is evening for you. You work as a professional astrologer in Finland. Anne holds a master's degree in developmental psychology and specializes in family-centered work. Additional credentials include a DIP MISPA from the UK Mercury School of Psychological Astrology. Anne is the founder of the lecturers of the Finnish Astrological Education Program, Journey of the Soul Limited, Education for Karmic and Esoteric Astrology. She is also the author of Keys to Karmic Astrology, and which has received critical review in the Finnish astrological community. So we are very excited to welcome you, Anne, and cannot wait for you to share your brilliance with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Merriman, and I'm very happy to be here. Thanks to OPA for having me speaking about unexpected planets today, and I will hope that Mercury is with me and will share my presentation. I hope you can see this presentation now. From the beginning, I hope this is fine. And you can call these planets also unintegrated or unexpected. And I want to talk about these planets because I feel that they're not so much mentioned in astrology, and they're also quite complex. They have many layers, and in this presentation today, I have done the presentation with focus on both the individual and integrated planets, relationship issues, and also the composite chart. So it's going to be like in three different approaches to this. And to read more about this, you can look at the next Evolving Astrology magazine. There will be an article on integrated planets, and there will be some examples of relationships there if you're interested in the subject. But to start off with this, what is an integrated planet? If we think about what we feel about aspects, aspects serve as a framework for the interactions between planets, and we are used to work with aspects as astrologers, and they help us to see how the planets connect and cooperate with each other. And that's why we might be a bit puzzled when we find a planet that is not making aspects. And of course, this is in one way a lie. I mean, a planet is never totally without doing any interaction with the chart. If we think about midpoint, so we think about the ascendant, descendant axis, or the nodes, planets are making some kind of connections to some point in the chart. So you can say or argue that there's never a planet that's totally unexpected. But there's a bit of controversy on how you should define an unexpected planet. And I want to show a bit like how I would feel that it can be possible to do that. And a definition can be that the major Ptolemaic aspects are counted. So if a planet is not making the big 5 aspects to other planets, then you might see it might be seen as unexpected. So we're talking about the trine, the opposition, the conjunction, the sextile, and the square. And if you don't have those with the planet, then you can think that it's not cooperating at the same level with the other planets in the chart. I usually use an orb that's quite tight or that's less than 4 degrees. So aspects that are very broad will not be calculated into this. And I don't include nodal contacts, and I don't include minor aspects or the nodal aspects. So with that background, then you might find a bit more of the so-called unexpected planets in a chart. How common these are, that's also a very good question. And I haven't found really any good, really good background on that or research. So that might be something of interest to dig deeper into. What I thought is that they are not that common, and maybe not that common that you have many of them unexpected. That you can have a few maybe unexpected or one unexpected, but I haven't seen many times a chart where there would be many of them unexpected. So, but this is one type of definition, and you can also I know you can find other types of definitions. But this is what I work with. And if we go into the commonalities, like in general, what you can feel about this type of planet in the chart, how common several planets have, it's the difference how common they are. For example, in one study of 400 charts, there was most unintegrated sun planets and least unintegrated Pluto in the chart. So there are differences in how common certain planets are. There were also quite little unintegrated or unexpected Venuses in that study, but we still would need a bigger sample to know more and several studies on that. But what these planets can feel like, or that you can expect maybe to see, is that they are more pure. They have like a more childish or pure like tone to them. They are not in that way having the same maybe demands of the other planets or the aspects. They are more like operating on a known level. They might also be planets that kind of crave more attention than aspected planets, and somehow they also operate on a principle of more selective engagement. It's like they would have their own rhythm that they work with. Some astrologer wanted to call them more like giving them a Uranian vibe in the chart, that they come and go like how they want, and they don't really like to be pinned down by the aspects or by other factors. So it's like a more raw and unfiltered form we are working with, and that might also show a different side of that planet, and it might also add to some talents and some gifts in the chart connected to that planet, and they might bring a more like charismatic vibe with them, and highlight the astrological profile. Like in some cases, a person with, for example, an unexpected moon might come on like more like a Cancerian trait person. Even you might not see that so clearly in the chart otherwise. So the planet that is not making aspects might actually stand out and show a lot of strength of that planet's or that sign that is connected to the planet, and that's kind of interesting and good to also understand when you find maybe a planet in the natal chart and you can't really know why you get this feeling with the client, but then when you see the unaspected planet, you might get another view of why you get this feeling so strongly of a certain sign. I like this picture, and when talking about the natal chart and how the planets unexpected might work there, it might just be a blind spot in a way for the person. The planet might be something that is seen in another way by the person than it's seen by other people, and this might be also add to some confusion. Like if I take the example of the unexpected sun, the person might be very, very self-confident in certain places or with certain things, and then in other places you might see a total lack of that confidence or a total different side, and this might be confusing maybe for the people and for the person themselves, that sometimes they might feel that they can express that sun quality very well or like 100%, and in another situation they might not be able to do that, and that's why it's really important to notice these planets and to be aware of them, both for the client and for the astrologer that's working with them. So they are important also in relationship, because of course in relationship the first person that we're working with is our chart, and everything goes back to our own chart and own person when we enter into a relationship. So in the natal chart, if you get a feeling that there's something that's kind of out of sync with the rest of the chart, that might be one indication of that we are working with unexpected planets. Also that there's a very strong expression of a certain zodiac sign that is not present in the chart otherwise so much. And that planet can also be more one-pointed in its expression because it doesn't have the help of the aspects or is regulated by those aspects. We might have a disruptive quality and rhythm of that planet behavior. We can also show very strong talents or start to overcompensate with the themes of that unexpected planet. One example might be if you look at the King Louis XIV that had unexpected sun and built all those castles and kind of overcompensated in that way. It can also be more visible to somebody else than maybe to ourselves if we're not aware of it, and also operate on a 0 to 100 pattern. Some places we might feel that we can with Mercury, a person maybe feels that they are so intellectual, they can make discussion, they can be social, and in other situations maybe almost come along as a shy person. So this might be very interesting with these planets. The house placement that the planet rules that's unexpected is very, very important also to look at. and what themes that house bring, because there might also be the same kind of pattern involving the house themes, that there might be very intense situations, and there might be then a lack of themes with that house. So it's important to also look at that in the individual chart. Then when we talk about families and family patterns, these planets might go in the family. It might go from generation to generation. So not just looking at the individual chart, but also looking at the parents, at the maybe grandparents, and maybe finding patterns of unexpected planets. There might be similar or they might be different, but it's can be very revealing if we are working with families. And this kind of planet can also serve as a kind of catalyst person for breaking old family patterns, or if we want to think about this as karmic patterns, or if we want to think about it as inherited patterns that we need to change, then there comes along this person that has the unexpected planet and needs to find a new way to look at this planet and to live this planet and in the family. And sometimes this is also connected to a lot of pressure. That might be pressure of some kind of following of footsteps. You have a pressure of being someone in the family line, and it's not possible just for this person. You have to do something else, which might then bring out this black sheep problem that this person is disrupting the order, but this person is actually working through a pattern that is worn out or that needs to be changed, and trying to find a new way to look at this. So this is one thing that you might experience when you see these planets in the family. Another theme that also might be very, very prominent is that there might be situations when the unexpected planets really much heightens the kind of, for example, with transit, there might be a very intense situations, and it might be like affecting also the family or the whole system, family system. So sometimes it might be inherited gifts, it might be overly expressed, or characteristics that are kind of expected of that person that they might not want to live up to. There might be the threads running over generations that need to have change, and these changes can take place, for example, when an unexpected planet is triggered by transits. And it can be important to distinguish between personal planets and collective planets here, because the personal planets might be more easy also to grasp or to understand for the person and the individual, but with the collective unexpected, there might be more like a feeling of fate, or why is this happening to me, or is somebody punish me with these situations that I need to deal with, or it might be more about like a broader view of the situation that the person is a bit of a catalyst for. So there might be a difference when you're looking of threads with personal or with collective planets. So it might give different views. Bruno Huber was a Swiss astrologer that also worked with unexpected planets, and he actually made this kind of step on, or different kind of levels of understanding with unexpected planets. And the first level is that it's on a purely material level, and it's kind of not known. It's unconscious. And I mean, if we don't spot it in the chart, and if we don't know that we have it, of course we cannot work with it in the same way. This might then in the second phase be on the emotional level, and that might bring maybe feelings of what's happening, or maybe something is my fault and I need, like the black sheep situation. Then you need to understand more, but you still have some level of understanding of the planet. And then at the third state, it's the mental level. Then we can start to analyze what's going on and what do we have, understand the planet more in an intellectual way, but not still totally fully. And the last phase, then we can grasp it more on a broader level and understand that we are maybe one in our place in maybe the role of the family or the generational issues that we are dealing with, and grasp more and understand and work with the planet and also with transits. So this is one example of how you can see unaspected planets. But there are a lot. There's other people's opinions too, and also thoughts about how you can work with these planets. But this is just one of them that I wanted to present. Then when we're talking on relationships, not as family threads, but more in personal relationships and intimate relationships, these planets are very important to understand and for the development of the relationships. And I also think that when we maybe want to do some synastry on our relationships, and we might have an unaspected planet, there might be a pattern, or there might be several of our relationships where the partner's planets are strongly influence the unaspected in our chart. And we might find that there's a pattern there, that we are drawn to people that actually provide aspects for that planet. And this might have a great impact on the relationship. So the planetary themes that are unaspected are often lifted up in the relationship. They are highlighted by the other person's planets, for example. And when a person with unaspected planets is entering a relationship, they might have with them a kind of idealistic view of the planet energies, and this can go way back. It can go back to maybe parental situations, or that they might have felt that they need to live out this planet energy very in a certain way, that have then led to that some themes that are not accepted with that planet might have been pushed away into the unconscious. So it's okay to be in a certain way with that planet, but the other side of it is maybe not fully accepted. And this might also sometimes lead to that a person that has an unaspected moon, for example, might meet another person that has an unaspected moon in the chart. And this leads to kind of a mirroring of those planets. And they are working with the same issues together. And one of them might have come a bit longer on the road with working with that planet than the other. But together they can kind of understand the unaspected planet. They can understand the themes they bring, but still it can be a bit rocky, because if both persons are having unaspected planet and we don't really know what the level is, so this is a place that is important to look at if you find that in a synastry, for example. Often the partner is integrating the unaspected planet in the chart with some other planets. For example, like if a partner have a strong aspected Venus, they might be doing a conjunction to the unaspected moon or something like this, that we find the interaction there very, very important. And this might feel like this person came along and they're providing me with the aspect for this planet. It might feel like being saved by the other person, and that might be confused a bit with love. That now I can get help with working with the planet, and that might then be quite complicated if it's not fully understood. It might also bring with some feelings of self-doubt in the area of that planet, or it can be more feelings of unease or restlessness, and that might be important also to if a person with unaspected planets feel too much pressure in the relationship, and that pressure might relate to something that's have been felt pressuring maybe in youth or childhood. It's important to also understand that and find outlets for that, so it doesn't affect the relationship in a negative way. So these are quite complicated mechanisms that these planets can bring. In relationship, it can also be some highlighting of certain ethical or moral issues that needs to be worked through, and it's very important to look at the transits of those unintegrated planets, because the transits might not be what we expect them to be. They might not be as bringing the normal traits that we think about, like, for example, a Pluto transit. We might think that this transit will bring certain themes to life. But with the unaspected planet, we cannot be so sure that it will be the things we see with other Pluto transits, for example. It's usually critical turning points when that planet gets aspect. Sometimes it doesn't like so much when a transit come along and force it to cooperate, because it's used to not doing that. So it might be very, very important phases in life and also in the relationship. Also with dependence, like I mentioned before, insecurity around those areas, and how we can cope with that, and also how not blaming oneself for things that is not your fault. That understand that it's also quite complicated mechanism behind these planets. So there's quite many ways this can play out in relationship. I also wanted to mention briefly the composite chart, because you can have unaspected planets in a composite, even though you don't have them in your natal chart or in the synastry. So in the composite chart doesn't describe the two people, it describes the relationship in itself, and in relation to the outer world. And unaspected planets might point to some risks or some themes that is important to work through in the relationship. And it might point to kind of a joint assignment that these people need to work on and need to be aware of in this relationship to help them to develop. And this might, of course, take some time, but it's important to know about it. And it might also give understanding of those planet themes in a totally different way than when we are not aware of it. So it's important to bring this also in relationships and in composites to get a bigger understanding of what can be at work. And so I had references, and there's not so many studies on this. I hope that we can have some more studies and also some more examples of how people view these planets in their life, in their relationships, and how they work with them. It would be very interesting to read more about this. But I wanted to bring up some themes connecting to this. And this is my contact information. If there's some question that you want to ask later, or if you're watching this on a later stage, then it's possible to be in contact with me. But thank you so much for letting me present about this theme today.
Anne, thank you so much. Thank you. This was really a wonderful, wonderful talk. And I noted how much I appreciated your four-pronged approach to understanding the unaspected planets from the material, emotional, mental, and spiritual standpoint. I really appreciated that. And also I was especially interested in the synastry. So at the end, we will have opportunities for people to ask questions. And I will offer that they can put these questions in the Q&A or probably raise their hand at the end. But that was so wonderful. And I'm so grateful that you brought this forward, and your graphics were beautiful as well. So thank you so much. Thank you. And so I am going to remove this spotlight, and I'm going to invite Kay Taylor on. And I would love to introduce Kay, and our president of OPA, our fearless leader. And Kay is a soul-centered astrologer. And again, thank you, Anne. Kay is a soul-centered astrologer, author, and a teacher who's been integrating evolutionary astrology with intuitive mastery, psychosynthesis, yoga, philosophy, and a wealth of healing wisdom for almost 40 years. Kay is president of OPA and is on the board of Kepler College. Her Soul Path School offers a certificate program for evolutionary astrology and also teaches ongoing classes in intuitive mastery. Publications include Soul Pathway 2016 and chapters for the anthologies, The Professional Astrologer and The Essential Astrology. Certified by OPA, ESAR, CAP, and NCGR Level 2, she maintains a thriving full-time consulting practice based in the San Francisco Bay Area. And Kay, very excited to have you now give your presentation today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mary Men. I appreciate the introduction. I appreciate being here. And of course, I appreciate OPA. My talk today is called The Dance of Relationship Consulting. And apart from all of the great astrology we can learn about, and we can figure out how to be great relationship consultants, we can have our understanding of the synthesis and the chart. I can't even talk about it yet. I think I'm still in Mercury. I'll just start with that. I think I'm still in Mercury retrograde, which hit me hard. Coming back, we can be very good astrologers around our synthesis, but do we know how to work with people in a good healing way? You'll find that people come to you for astrology consultations with these typical questions, as Alan had already mentioned some of them. Will I ever find a partner? Are we compatible? We have people who've been together for years and they come in and they say to you, are we compatible? Should we split up? Tremendous amount of pressure to try to answer that question. How long will this relationship last? That's a really tough one, because if you tell people that their relationship is great and long lasting, they may not do the work, they may not bring up issues that are uncomfortable, On the other hand, if you tell them, oh, it looks like you'll be broken up in 3 years, then it's not even worth engaging in the relationship. They're not going to do the things that they ought to do. And sometimes they just say, I want to understand this person. How can I know who they are and figure them out? When we're confronted with these various questions, we have two pieces of overview energy to work with. One is ethics. What is ethical to answer? And how can we give good, strong, ethical guidance to people? And then the other is starting to unpack what is the reality of relationship? What is it that people actually want? What is viable? And this will be a big part of what we're going to do here today. We'll be talking about relationship sessions, whether it's an individual you're talking to about their relationships, which is often a very common theme, or it's two people coming in together and wanting to understand their relationship better. We'll be looking at what the challenges and gifts are of relationship astrology, the ethical considerations, addressing the vulnerability of clients when they're in this situation. We're talking about very sensitive, personal, confidential information. We'll be looking at the balance of dialogue with the client, finding out more about them, and at the same time delivering the astrology knowledge that we have to give. We'll explore mindfulness and self-examination that would allow us to be a more ethical, conscious astrologer. And definitely the cross-cultural diversity issues that are strongly present these days for all of us, and how we can create a safe container for people. So this will be the underpinnings of what we're going to do. And at a core level, in my mind, is connected to the tenet of do no harm. And it's very easy to do harm as an astrologer, but it's especially easy to do harm when we're talking about relationships. One of the first ways we can be conscious and skillful in our relationship astrology is to use the language of possibilities and not earth-shattering pronouncements. We want to obviously share what we see in the chart, but I would propose that no matter how good we are at understanding the astrology, there's always a certain amount of wiggle room. There are ways, and I'm going to talk about this a lot today, is the way that consciousness comes in, and the way that a big part of what we're meant to do is help a client understand who they are and make informed choices. The first thing that I feel makes it difficult to be 100% in pronouncements is that the whole chart expresses your relationship potential. It's like, yes, I would, certainly agree with what Alan said about the 7th house and the rulers, and we could go to the other houses that have traditionally a relationship interpretation, like the 5th house of romance, or the 8th house of intimate bonding, or what about 4th house? Family. When you meet somebody that you feel really connected with on a romantic level, you're often thinking about, do you want to make family with this person? But that's if you're a person who wants that. If the chart suggests that this would be the kind of relationship you want, and not everybody wants the same thing. Some people are less interested in relationship, want to have more freedom. I was, really aware in putting this talk together and listening to Alan today too, that so much of relationship astrology comes from a very traditional perspective, where the ideal is that you are find the right person early on, you get married and you stay married for a long time. And as we'll see in many connections, like that is not necessarily what everybody is wired for, what everybody wants. We want to understand people's uniqueness. Certainly, Venus and the moon are very significant. The aspect patterns to them, the relationship houses, we have to look at all of that. And there's a range of meanings, right? Each planet can operate in a dysfunctional way, an average way, or a really evolved way. And each sign has the same continuum of shadowy to average to high level evolved. And we're looking at these multifaceted aspect patterns. That's a lot to come up with an absolute pronouncement. We also have to consider consciousness. And one of the things that Dane Rudger said is, you can tell a lot from a chart, but you cannot tell a person's consciousness. You don't even know if this is a chart of a person or a dog or start of a business. The age of the person will make a difference in how they're operating from the chart quite often. Not always. Some people don't grow very much or very fast, but relationship for an 18-year-old is generally different than a 40-year-old or a 70-year-old. And then we have the issue of healing privilege. Is this person able to activate different kinds of healing, psychotherapy, or good friends to talk to understand and to take their relationships to a different level? And not everybody has had that privilege. We also want to understand karmic contracts. And here what I see is that some people have this obsessive desire to be together and feel like a person is their soulmate, or have an immediate challenge with a person they just met, like their new sister-in-law, and this is not a person they want to be in the same room with. So the karmic contracts are part of an unconscious connection that we have with different people. And the astrology and what it says may not impact a person's deep desire to be in a relationship that we would look at and say, this is problematic. I also feel that there's not enough research about anything in astrology, and this is one of my core issues. Now, in relationship astrology, Alfie Lavoie, who's a well-known astrologer with a lot of experience in research and computers, he's been doing some pretty significant research in relationship astrology and the astrology of illness. And one of the things, for example, he found was that our classic idea that two people will be compatible if one person's sun is conjunct the other person's moon, right? We all learned that at some point. And in this sort of gendered, sexist way, and it's better if it's the man's sun and the woman's moon. That turned out not to be true in his research of thousands of charts and looking at long-term, technically happy relationships. So before we think that we could stand in judgment of relationship astrology in a chart, or how two people are getting along with synastry or composites, I feel we need to have more research and be more like doctors are, where you say, well, according to 1 million case studies, we have discovered that if you and your partner have this connection, you have a 42% chance of taking this relationship to the next level. We don't have anything like that. We have what we've learned, it's been passed down. It is very connected to cultural, older ideas about things, and then at the same time, it's not, we also have our own ideas based on the charts we see, and we often draw people to us who have charts similar to ourselves. So we don't have an exact objective relationship with our astrology. We see through our own eyes. And I've also seen through my own eyes that perfect chart connections can be very boring. It often seems best for people to have some nice, smooth connections, some trines and some conjunctions, and a few difficult connections so that it's interesting and there's this reason for being together. Because honestly, we like our relationships because they're growthful. So my bottom line here is beware of fateful, harmful predictions. And everyone here who's been an astrologer for any length of time will know that we do what's called cleanup work. And the cleanup work is people coming to you and saying, you know, I went to see this other astrologer and they told me that I would never be married or I would never have a relationship. I experienced that myself in my early astrology readings from others. You know, people would look at my chart and say, you'll never be happy in relationship. You'll always be disappointed in love. And it took me a long time to understand those patterns and to see them in other people and understand that it's not the right assessment to say you'll never be happy. It's more to say you have these particular needs and you need to be in relationships that allow you to express those needs and not try to fit yourself into a box of what other people are telling you a relationship should be like. Now, in my mind, in the way I think about relationship astrology or all astrology, really, I have this kind of formula in my mind that helps me as the underpinnings of working with clients. That the natal chart holds our karma and our fate. You know, this is the unresolved thoughts and feelings from each lifetime and each experience within a lifetime. It's the residue, the samskaras, as Alan calls them from the Vedic perspective. And this is the chart, it's the roadmap, it's what we start with. And then you'll see that in childhood, the imprinting really deepens it, it adds it. We get a certain dose of what the chart says in our early experiences. But then we have plus or minus healing. So as I said, the privilege and the opportunity to receive some kind of healing or not. And then we add in the consciousness of the soul, right? What is flowing in that is navigating this human machine. And from that, we have the outcome or the likely outcome. So to put that simply, we have our fate, we have our medicine, and those two things come together to hopefully have an empowered result and not just a continuation of what we've always had. Now, to educate yourself about cultural awareness and diversity is absolutely essential these days in my mind. I mean, we always knew as astrologers, perhaps, that cross-cultural awareness, people from different countries, maybe people from different economic stratas, that this was an important thing to know about. You know, for instance, there's some cultures in which the children stay living with the family until they get married. And the idea of them moving out and living alone and being independent is just not okay. Whereas in the Western cultures, especially United States, you know, many parents think the minute their kids turn 18, they need to leave home. They need to either go to college or get a job, but, you know, get out of here. It's my time now. And being aware of these differences is very essential to be ethical and mindful when we're talking to somebody and we're not trying to put our cultural viewpoints on top of them. And yet now we also have greater and greater levels of diversity, especially with the, you know, sort of explosion of young people wanting to have more fluidity, more flexibility, their sense of being non-binary. The, you know, certain aspects like, you know, transgender people have always been part of our culture. But now there's this greater awareness and openness. And if you're, you know, an astrologer who's living in a coastal urban area, you probably see many clients who are operating in a unique way in their relationships. But if you are not in these areas and you don't really understand what's going on in the culture, I would say it's very important, again, in terms of not doing harm, that you have a basic understanding of what non-traditional relationship is, that you understand the different expressions of the LGBTQ community, that you listen to hear about pronouns when somebody's talking about, you know, their partner or their friend, and you notice what pronoun they're using. Are they saying he or her or them? And as much as possible, be sensitive to that, and, you know, be able to flow with the person that you are talking to. And I wanted to mention that last year in our relationship OPA Live panel, we had Amanda Moreno, and she did a great talk on this issue exactly. And you can still access the recording if you're an OPA member on our YouTube channel, or you can read her article and all of the previous editions of the Evolving Astrologer, formerly called the Career Astrologer. Those magazine are still available as PDFs in our website. Now, here's just a list of some of these words that if you read down this list, if you don't know what these words mean, I suggest that you do some research about them. You know, cisgender, for instance, is the gender that you were assigned at birth, and not everybody resonates with that for themselves. Non-binary, not feeling like you're either male or female. Polyamory or ethical non-monogamy, people who are choosing to be in open relationships in an ethical way. You know, I mean, back in the day, you know, sort of 70s or so, as I was growing up, we called it open relationship, but it didn't have quite the structure, the ethics, the consciousness that has been brought into our current society. And you'll find that, you know, these questions come up in different ways. You'll have clients who are choosing a non-traditional relationship. You'll have clients where one person's coming in and they want traditional or non-traditional and their partner doesn't. And the more you're able to know ahead of time so that you can support people, I feel the better off you're going to be. And now, of course, if you really don't understand what they're talking about, you can ask the question. But the more you know on every level as an astrologer about what's going on in the world, what people are facing, what do they face in their jobs, what do they face with their family, what do they face with their culture, that can help you very, very much do an excellent job with your client. Now, your consciousness is the key to this. It's like we can teach you in the OPA consulting skills training how to be a very good counselor, but you have to understand yourself more. First of all, you have to understand if you're willing to work with clients with different identities. And are you competent to do so? Have you done some research? Have you come to understand what people are experiencing so that your automatic language and empathy and compassion shows up in your consulting session? And, you know, are you knowledgeable about different cultures? And we take people in the OPA Consulting Skills Program into some exercises to understand where your unconscious biases are. And we all have biases. It takes a lot of consciousness, meditation, looking at oneself, so that you're able to work from a place of neutrality. And you may have certain ethical boundaries that tell you that there's certain clients that you should not work with, that you should refer to other people. So at a bottom line, some of the key points I want to make here are, do not make assumptions on people, okay? Make sure that as someone is asking their questions and talking about what's going on, you're not assuming because they're wearing, a wedding ring, that means that they're straight, and you ask them about their opposite sex, partner, their husband or their wife. That you don't make an assumption that they are looking for a 50-year marriage. The way that you can be an excellent consultant in astrology is to do a lot of active listening, to listen deeply to what a person is saying, to reflect back, to paraphrase, to hear the emotions that are happening, maybe a little bit different than what they're saying. In the psychosynthesis training that I have undergone for many years, we believe that empathic love or compassion is absolutely the healing force. And there's been a lot of scientific research in therapy over the years that that's what makes the difference about whether people heal or not in therapy, is their relationship with their therapist. So we're not getting into boundary issues here. We're not talking about sex or love affairs with your clients. We're talking about unconditional positive regard, empathic love, really truly caring for people that we're working with. And while we're talking to them, we need to check in regularly. So again, we get to this place of, a session is not meant to be a monologue where you're this expert and you just tell people who they are and what's going to happen to them. You want to hear what they say, offer some astrology, check in and see if it resonates with them, go to the next step, keep going. This allows a person to feel fully seen and heard. Being objective, a little bit what I said a moment ago, it's like, it's not about you. Just because you got a divorce and it worked out well, doesn't mean that this person needs to get a divorce. And I hear a lot of that. In fact, it's very important in my mind to keep yourself out of the session for the most part. Your opinions, your experience may be 1 or 2%. Every once in a while, it's validating for a person to hear, yeah, I get it, I've gone through that, but not your whole story. And keeping your story out of it and keeping to the astrology will help you be, objective. Now, sensitive topics are another key point in consulting skills, because many times you can look at the chart and you can see what you imagine is evidence of abuse, very difficult childhoods, how this impacts the relationship, challenges in the parents' marriage that impact them. And because, especially in a first reading, if somebody's your regular client, you start to gain more trust and you can talk about more things. But in the beginning, I feel it's very important that you mention sensitive topics lightly and wait to see if the client picks up on it and they're willing to get the information. And another sensitive topic is when you're talking to someone who's in a situation of domestic violence or potential divorce. If you make recordings of your sessions, which I do and many astrologers do these days, many times you'll find that either people tell their partner what you said, well, my astrologer said you were a terrible person, or the partner is snooping around on their phone or their computer and gets a hold of the recordings. And so be careful about your recordings and be careful about what you're saying about other people in your sessions. And so coming back to my first point, my first slide about people are going to ask you all these questions. Remember that you don't have to answer the questions that they've proposed. You can answer the real questions and illuminate their chart about what's actually going on for them. And this is the greatest gift we can give. Now, here's an example. I'm going to go through quickly some of the outer planet transits, which many astrologers will tell people this is when your relationship's going to end, because this planet is coming into your seventh house of marriage and partnership, and it's all going to fall apart. Mars comes in, and this is a lighter one. Obviously, it's only usually a couple of months, but its meaning is about coming into a sense of your own selfhood in your relationship. So you might be more grouchy when Mars is in your seventh house, but that is an opportunity to speak more truth and to be able to come forward with issues that maybe you've been letting slide for a while. That makes a more vibrant relationship. With Jupiter coming into the seventh, you want to go for more. You want to expand. Now, Saturn, this is where we get more into the often negative interpretation. You're having to look at any relationships that are committed and significant, and whether you want to let go of them, back away from them, end them, and what relationships are worth working hard to mature. And the Saturn time period of that 2 to 3 years will often be a time that you can take an average relationship and move it into something deep, committed, and powerful. Uranus, some will say, oh, it's a radical break. You find out something that you didn't know, and the relationship is over instantly. And yet, really, this is a time when you and your partner both need more freedom and more authenticity in the relationship. And you can work on these outer transits ahead of time and start talking about these issues and bringing them to the fore. Neptune is often said to be the dissolving of a relationship, the sort of the confused ending. And yet it is the opportunity to spiritualize our significant relationships, to get to know people in a more soul-centered way. And then finally, Pluto comes in and offers us the opportunity to explore our shadow material in our partnership, and also by opposition to our ascendant. We're really faced with the limitations and the unconscious fears that are getting in the way of our relationship depth. Here are some key ethical issues that, as astrologers, we're discussing in the communities and trying to come up with really good guidelines. Probably one of the most challenging ones is this idea of looking at the chart of another person. So some astrologers would say, absolutely never. I'm not looking at anybody's chart who's not in the room. I'm just talking to my client, and I can see everything I need to see in their chart about their relationships. And then some will say you can look at the chart of another person as long as that person is given express permission. And that's kind of the more average ethical stance on it. And some are saying, if the client gives me the chart, I will look at it. So the ethical guidelines in every organization are a little bit different, but always ethics comes down to you and what feels true for you, what feels honest and authentic. Another key issue is when a relationship is brand new. Somebody's just dating. They've just connected on some app, or they've had a couple of dates. And is it really ethical to bring that information in? I have found myself that when you give a lot of information to a person about someone they don't know well, whether it's technically good or challenging information, it causes them to be in a different place than the person they're talking to. So one person may think, this is the love of my life, and we've got these great connections, and we're very soul-centered. And the other person is like, oh, well, we just had one date and I'd like to check it out, maybe have another date. And we don't help people by giving them too much information about someone they don't know. Then there's the issue of reading children's charts. And is it okay to read a baby's chart? Are we setting up expectations with the parents? I feel myself that we can help parents a lot understand the nature of their children and the nature of the way they normally parent, nurture, and create boundaries, Moon and Saturn. But to be very, open-ended about it so that they're also encouraged to see intuitively what the child is bringing to the table and support them. And then we have relationship consultations for two people. Partners want to come in, or three people, and they want to talk about their relationship together to know more about it, or maybe to resolve problems that they have. And for this, I feel we need a decent amount of consulting skill. So if you don't have that, then it's good to refer couples and more to astrologers who have consulting skills, including, there's many psychotherapists these days who are also astrologers. And then we have the issue of confidentiality with connected clients. As you know, our referrals are amazing. We all want to have referrals. And many times we can end up doing sessions for, the two main people, maybe somebody else that they've been in relationship with or currently relationship with, and their exes and their friends and their boss and their adult children. So that can become very tricky, because when somebody asks you a question about someone that you're also doing consultations for, things, and you don't want to be a keeper of secrets, and you also have to be confidential. So make sure with referrals and talking to more than one people in a connected circle that you are paying a lot of attention to what works for you and how you can continue to be confidential. Okay, slide, there we go. And working with a couple, little extra, yes, training. Is it your scope of practice? Do you have these therapists that you can refer people to? Do you have books that you can refer to your clients? And to remember that favoritism of one person over another always gets you into trouble. So my summary here is, this is a place to have the deepest levels of awareness, that you listen deeply, that you hold empathic love and objectivity, that you understand what's in the chart is a probability, that you have sensitive, you have the qualifications and the referrals, and that you understand that we are globally in relationship with many, many people. And in this culture, we put a lot of emphasis on, monogamous, traditional, romantic love, where you find the right person and stay with them forever. But I'm convinced over time that there are many powerful soul-centered relationships we find ourselves in. And we won't really understand the nature and the depth of it until we come to the end of our lives. And so I thank you for being with me in this talk. Love to have you study with me. I have a certificate training in evolutionary astrology, but I also teach intuition and empathic healing and mentorship. And that's my book, Soul Pathway.
Wow, Kay, thank you so much. I really appreciate your speaking awareness around the cultural sensitivity and the ethical considerations, and also creating that safe container. Very, very, I believe, very critical points right now where we are in astrology. Thank you.
Thank you, Merriman.
Yes, and I'd love to invite our panelist and Celeste Brooks, the co-manager of OPA Live, to come back on screen right now. We have several questions in the Q&A, so I invite our folks to stay and to ask questions, and I will, oh my goodness. Let's see. Alan, you're so good. Alan has
Been practicing.
yes, he's answered many of these questions. So would anyone like to raise their hand and ask any questions? They have the ability to raise their hands, correct, Kay?
They do, but they can't ask questions. They need to type them in the
Okay.
in the Q&A or the chat box. And there were a lot of questions already in the
There
chat box
were.
on
There
the way.
were. Alan was so good at answering them, but I'm going to go ahead and highlight some for folks who may not have seen this. So Alan, Jennifer had asked, with respect to the Vedic and Western, do you blend and use them simultaneously in your practice?
You want me to answer live?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
In the interim years between 1995 and year 2000, I was like a man with a broken leg and a crutch, and I was using both Western astrology at the same time as I was trying to learn Vedic astrology, and was using one as an assist for the other. But after year 2000, I had pretty much mastered the basics of Vedic astrology such that I let go of the Western astrology, and frankly have not used it since. I mean, I scarcely know where Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are, for instance, anymore. And whenever I look at a horoscope, it's always, through the sidereal zodiac. Although I've got to confess, just to be, I don't want to be too much of a chauvinist. Every now and again, I see a chart that does confound me. And recently I was looking at the horoscope of Martha Stewart. And I've got to say, it doesn't seem to work in sidereal, and it seems to work better in tropical. But as soon as I admit that, I would hasten to add that is a kind of minority sort of circumstance for me. And I find that, after 20 plus years of comparison and contrast and working with both zodiacs, I find that sidereal works much better than tropical. For those who haven't put in that kind of time, those words, can fall flat. And it's only by, looking at hundreds and hundreds of horoscopes would you really get that sense of conversancy or familiarity with it. But anyway, to answer the question, my practice since year 2000, with clients has been 100% Vedic astrology, and I don't find that there's any instance where I need to reach out to use my old toolkit of Western astrology to deal with whatever I'm looking at, whether that be, the analysis of a person's career prospects, relationship prospects, relationship compatibility, health issues, finances, predicting something for the future, answering specific questions. It goes on and on. But, it's a question of experience now that I've put a lot of time and study into this.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate that. Elena had asked an interesting question to Anne about the antisha between unaspected planets and if this counts. And you had answered that. I agree. It is a very interesting question, and one that you did not have an answer to, but I wanted to ask any of the astrologers, Celeste included, if you have a thought on the antition with unaspected planets, because that's a great question. I mean, I have a thought on that. Maybe I'll share. I mean, I think that is a powerful way, being able to look at the declination or the antition to add a little bit more, or to add more to the story, to make these connections and bring these planets into play. So that's something I actually, when I'm looking at charts a little later, especially because I have an interesting case of that in my own chart that I may look at and delve into a little deeper. But that was a great question, Elena, and thank you for putting it out to us.
I could just toss in a remark there. I saw Jennifer mention that Lee Lehman refers to Antisha in her work. Lee's work is not exclusively horary, but that's basically her real expertise and that which she teaches courses. I'd almost forgotten about Antisha, since, studying it when I did my diploma with the Faculty of Astrological Studies. But this past winter, I read 3 books by John Frawley, who is an esteemed, horary practitioner of the British schools. And he uses Antisha quite a lot, and that had actually reawakened my interest. And there's an example of a Western technique which is never discussed in Vedic astrology, and I think it's worth looking into. It goes to show that there's bits and pieces here and there that we can fruit that we can pluck from different trees that is quite useful to become familiar with.
Fruit from different trees.
Low hanging.
Jennifer's suggesting Elizabeth Hazel has a good book on Antisha. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I think it's powerful to incorporate into readings. Very powerful. I do like this question. And Aletha asked, when assessing if a planet is considered unaspected, do you consider the modern planets or only the traditional visible planets?
Yeah, and I consider the modern. So I work with modern planets always.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love making that distinction. And let's see. And Cheryl had asked, Anne, are aspects to the ascendant or to the midpoints taken into account when considering unaspected planets? That's a great question.
Yeah, it's also a very good question, and I don't work with that. I'm not taking that. It's just the major Ptolemaic aspects, and just between the planets and the modern planets.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And then for unaspected planets, Leah had asked for unaspected planets. Do we look at aspects to the angles and Chiron? And again, that was a question that referenced the 7 traditional. But so with angles to Chiron, let's see. And that question. I'm sorry.
I'm not taking Chiron either into account with aspect.
Beautiful.
But this is just one definition. Like you can work with other definitions.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I think I have navigated all of the questions and covered any duplications here. So I'd like to, if no one else has any questions, and if you do, just pop them into the chat. I would like to invite Celeste to share a bit about our next OPA Live event, which you've been coordinating.
Yes, thank you so much, Merriman. So the next OPA Live will be on December 17th. So mark your calendars for 10 a.m. The topic will be the astrology of 2024. And we have 3 amazing astrologers, Lee Lehman and Adam Ellenboss and Wendy Stacy. So it is going to be a very rich discussion about what we can expect to come up in 2024 and some tips to prepare for it. I also want to mention that I am the host of Transit Talks, which is a monthly get-together, and it's a casual get-together that all OPA members are invited to every first Sunday. And the next one is October 1st at noon Pacific time.
Thank you. Thank you. And the OPA Live on December 17th will be at 10 a.m. Pacific time.
Yes, I'm
So
sorry. Yes,
in our
Pacific time.
calendars, because that is a stellar panel and should be very exciting, and we can ask Lee ourselves. Beautiful, beautiful. And Kay, I'd like to invite you to share any additional information around OPA events or membership.
Just that OPA membership is $80 a year. We have some sliding scale for currency discount countries. And it's certainly well worth it when you think that we have this OPA Live event 4 times a year. We have speakers once or twice a month that are, of the really well seasoned category. We have now the transit talks, and I have to say it's so exciting to us at OPA that AFAN merged with us, and Celeste is one of the many gifts we've received from that merger. And so now we have this transit talk program that used to be an AFAN program. And we also have instituted an AFAN idea that we were kicking around. I mean, basically in merging, what we all did is said, okay, what are we both doing that's the same? And we'll keep doing that under OPA. And what was AFAN doing that was different? Well, they had done more of this community talk piece where brand new or emerging speakers could speak, and we would invite the whole public. So you don't have to be a member to come to that. And we're calling it the Mercury Hour. And so going forward, with your membership, we're going to have an event virtually every week. It's building up that way, plus the certification trainings and retreats and virtual workshops. So right now we're looking for a retreat location for the fall of 2024, where we can get together and have a little conference in person and do the trainings. And we'll also do a virtual OPA Live where people will get all the recordings from the previous OPA Live, plus we'll have some new speakers bringing things up to date. But our last OPA Live was so amazing. There's a lot of content there that we should just all listen to again. So that's those couple of the events that are coming up for us. I'll also say that UAC, the United Astrological Congress, which used to happen every 4 years, but has been sidelined because of COVID. I'm working on that with the presidents of the other major organizations, and we're looking at 2026. So keep that on your calendars too. So yeah, so much rich, amazing astrology to share.
Absolutely. And Kay, thank you so much for your dedication and vision to astrology and to OPA. Really, it's very exciting. I vote on having the retreat in Sedona since I'm here. I will welcome you all. Everyone stays with me. And then I also will invite anyone who might be interested in presenting in the future, if you're a member of OPA, to email opalive@opaastrology.org with any ideas for topics, and we can send you an application to potentially speak. And in closing, Alan, Ann, Kay, thank you for bringing us such a beautiful way to spend a Sunday, sharing the stars, sharing our passion, sharing our our individual ways of providing this service to the world. Thank you. And so
Thank
with
you.
that, I think we will conclude. And Celeste, thank you.
Thank you, Merriman, for the excellent job hosting.
Thank you.
And I do want to answer this question. Yes, the next transit talk is Sunday, October 1st. So if it says Monday on the website, I'll have it fixed.
Thank you. Thank you. So in closing, I wish all of these wonderful souls across the world a wonderful week, and appreciate your coming and sharing this time with us.
Great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.